China is collecting the world's DNA, and the reason is sinister. The People's Republic of China has been collecting people's DNA for years. The coming collapse of China, the country's sinister motivation, should be of great concern to the United States. With over 80 million health profiles, China has the largest DNA database in the world and growing. In an interview with Fox News, Chang warned that China plans to use this information to create bioweapons designed to target specific ethnic groups. The COVID is not the last pathogen that will be generated from Chinese soil. And so we've got to be concerned that the next disease is more transmittable and more deadly than the novel COVID. China reportedly collects the DNA of its own citizens for purposes of law enforcement, tracking down dissidents, and forming a tightly controlled surveillance state. They have also found ways to obtain the DNA of foreigners, including Americans. How exactly do they get this sensitive information? Buying American companies which have DNA profiles, subsidizing DNA analysts for ancestry companies, and hacking. For example, in 2015, it was discovered that the Republic of China hacked Anthem, the second largest insurance company in the U.S. Now, the Republic of China is using the COVID to enlarge its DNA database by requiring internationally accepted QR codes for travel in and out of the country and using vaccine diplomacy. What they're doing is they are saying, we'll get this vaccine to you, but we need to complete our trials. So we're going to use your population as the test. If you don't participate in these trials, you're not getting the vaccine. Chang continued, Beijing is trying to extend its influence by making its vaccine available, while at the same time collecting very sensitive information about people outside China. China currently has 5 vaccine candidates that have reached phase 3 clinical trials. The final phase of trials has been rolled out in at least 16 countries, including Brazil, Turkey, Morocco, and UAE, United Arab Emirates. China's reasons for wanting this information involve dominating the biotechnology, this industry which is very important to them. They included it in their Made in China 2025 initiative, which is a decade-long program to dominate certain industries. The second reason is something much more sinister. China is probably trying to develop diseases that target not just everybody, but target only certain ethnic or racial groups. According to Chang, genetic data gives China the ability to create bioweapons that can target certain groups of people. Furthermore, he said the country's behavior of collecting the DNA of foreigners while prohibiting Chinese DNA to foreign researchers supports the theory. We've got to be extremely concerned because that is not consistent with a country that wants to cooperate with the rest of the world. That is consistent with a country developing biological weapons. People have said biological weapons don't work. Well, we don't know. Well, we do know they work because we had the COVID, which may or may not have been a biological weapon. But we do know that it crippled the United States, and that's what Beijing is really looking for. Now that China has had proof of concept, Chiang urged the United States to act swiftly and prevent the superpower from obtaining any more American DNA. We should not allow any Chinese or Chinese-affiliated organization to test DNA of Americans. Either you agree to all inspections regime or we're pulling out of the Biological Weapons Convention. China has denied allegations that the corona pandemic, which some believe emerged from a government lab in Wuhan, was a biological weapon. In 1984, the Republic of China signed the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention Treaty in 1984, which prohibits them from developing, producing, or stockpiling biological or toxin weapons.
Back to one of our top stories now. DNI Director John Ratcliffe warning that China is the greatest national security threat the U.S. faces, saying that Beijing intends to dominate the U.S. and the rest of the planet. We're going to bring in Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, how you doing? And good day to you. He talked a lot with the Wall Street Journal and FoxNews.com, clearly laying out a message. How do you receive this, Gordon?
Well, I think that he's certainly right. You know, many people say that China's trying to compete with the United States in the international system to replace us at the top of it. That's only half right, because China's really trying to overthrow that international system and replace it with the notion of worldwide Chinese rule, that China is the world's only sovereign state. And Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, actually acts as if other countries don't have sovereignty. So this is not just a theoretical concern. You know, we talk about Iran, Russia, North Korea. Well, those countries could not stand up to the international system if China didn't back them.
You believe it is the defining issue of our time. So you're on the same page of what Ratcliffe was saying a bit earlier today. Joe Biden was in the New York Times just yesterday. Here's his quote. When dealing with China, he says, it's all about leverage, and in my view, we don't have it yet. How do you read that comment?
First of all, I don't think that Joe Biden is correct on that, because the U.S. has far more leverage over China than China has on the U.S. So, for instance, last year, China's merchandise trade surplus with the U.S. constituted 81.8% of its overall merchandise surplus. That means China is overwhelmingly dependent on the U.S. market. It's also dependent on investment from the U.S. and technology. So I think what Joe Biden is trying to do in those remarks is basically say, I don't want to impose costs on China because I don't have the means. But he does have the means, and I think he's going to have to do it to protect the United States as president.
Here is Ratcliffe's statement. I call its approach of economic espionage rob, replicate, and replace.
Yes, well, clearly China's been doing that. By what he's meaning is that they steal our technology, they then duplicate our industries, and then they put us out of business. And they've done that for a number of companies, American and others. China steals somewhere between $150 to $600 billion worth of U.S. intellectual property each year. Now, the Director of National Intelligence put that figure at $500 billion in his op-ed. We don't really know a precise figure, but it is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, Vice President Biden has said look, we really don't want to impose costs on China. We want to develop the U.S. Well, of course we should develop the U.S., but we can't develop the U.S. when China is stealing $500 billion of U.S. IP a year.
But that was a lot what the trade war was all about, wasn't it? To try and grab that leverage. That's what we've been talking about for 4 years, right?
That's right, because the tariffs that President Trump imposed were under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 as a remedy for the theft of IP, but they haven't stopped the theft. And by the way, our Phase 1 trade deal signed on January 15th is failing because the Chinese are not complying with their obligations. So we need to impose greater costs on China. I know people don't want to do that, but we don't really have a choice.
Yeah, security threat number one. That's what Ratcliffe calls it. Thank you, Gordon. Nice to see you again. Thanks for coming back today. Gordon Chang.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.